whatever you touch will turn into gold. It's giving unlimited faith. Jupiter arrives, knocks on the door, says hello. What happens when the two greatest sources of life and meaning in astrology come together in the sign of Leo? One of the most positive transits of the year and known to many astrologers as one of the most luckiest and abundant of the year. That is Sun conjunct Jupiter in Leo. When this transit comes through, it brings a much deeper question to the present. What kind of plot am I supposed to have in this life? And am I in that path? Hi, America Beach, and welcome to my channel where I bring the sky, myth, and psychological soul together with astrology. And today we are talking about the Sun conjunct Jupiter in Leo that is happening on July 29th, known to be one of the most exciting transits every single year. In this video today, we are going to look at the Sun conjunct Jupiter in Leo, the mythology behind this conjunction that is of Apollo and Zeus, what signs and placements will feel it the most, how to integrate this transit into your own birth chart, and how to work with this energy. So make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and help me grow this channel. And I will be doing horoscopes for all 12 signs in Jupiter's transit through Leo next week. So make sure to stay tuned if you're interested. Now let's get started. On July 29th at 5:18 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, the Sun will meet with Jupiter in the sign of Leo at 6 degrees and 24 minutes. And this conjunction, Sun and Jupiter, occurs once a year, as we know, as it takes Jupiter one entire year to go through one sign and 12 years to go through the entire zodiac. This means that this year Jupiter is answering to the Sun as it moves through each zodiac sign throughout the entire year, bringing a different solar theme to your Jupiter's expression and your solar expression. But today we are talking about the Sun meeting Jupiter in the sign of Leo, where there's an alchemical work to be performed. And this is also a time where we will be stepping into our own light according to our natal chart. According to our Sun in our natal chart. There we go. So you will begin to feel this transit around July 24th as the Sun gets within 3 degrees of its engagement range of in Leo. Now, this transit you will begin to feel beginning July 24th when the Sun gets within the 3-degree engagement range of Jupiter. That means when just the Sun gets to 2 degrees of Leo, you will be feeling this. It will make its conjunction on July 29th and then separate through August 2nd. Now, this conjunction will occur right before a full moon in Aquarius at 6 degrees and 30 minutes at 7:36 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, about 2 hours to be exact from this conjunction. So the timing is kind of fascinating. When Jupiter and the Sun conjunct, or they perfect just 2 hours later, this full moon in Aquarius with a Pluto opposition and a sextile from Uranus will kind of be changing the dynamic a little bit of this Sun and Jupiter conjunction. So when the Sun meets Jupiter, we begin to say to ourselves, like, I know who I am. And, your identity starts to shift and expand, and the vision and your confidence begins to increase. And this is kind of when the light awakens. And then there's a full moon in Aquarius that happens 2 hours later, and the energy shifts. So this energy I find really interesting because this acts as a mitigator, and it prevents Leo from becoming too self-consumed and focused on who it benefits, right? And other than themselves. And so there's this tension being pulled about maybe perhaps learning the difference between recognition and contribution, right? A healthy Leo learns recognition through contribution, giving back, and leaning towards that during this transit can help us reap the benefits of this Sun and Jupiter conjunction. So we're going to go a little bit further into that, but I just kind of wanted to set the scene a little bit with this full moon. I'm not going to be talking much further about it, but I felt it was something very important to at least start to talk about. Before we can understand why this conjunction is so significant, we first have to quickly understand what each of these planets represent on their own. That is the sun and Jupiter in Leo. And the sun in traditional astrology is much more than our personality. It is the source of life itself. It's our essence. And every morning the sun rises and gives us light. It gives us warmth and order and a rhythm to the world. Ancient astrologers understood the sun as the visible image of vitality and consciousness. But most importantly, we need to look at the sun as the plot in our life. It is the hero's journey, right? According to Joseph Campbell. It is the center around which everything else revolves on, just like right? Just like the planets surround themselves around the sun. And the sun is one of the most important archetypal symbols. It is that of royalty and the king, the father figure, but the sun can also tell us about our parental inheritance. Psychologically, the sun represents our sense of identity in our charts. It is that part of us that questions, who am I? And what kind of life am I meant to live? What's my purpose? It's that capacity to express ourselves authentically and to become who we were born to be. But it can also tell us what kind of conflicts we have, whether they're internal or external factors that might stop us from becoming that individual person we were meant to be. And that it could be that these aspects to our natal sun is what stops us from becoming our true selves. So as we know, the problem with the sun is that it always wants to shine. That's its true nature. It's what it's supposed to do. However, the sun needs to struggle as well, right? Because it just needs, that's how you find the light. This is one of the reasons I love this transit of the sun meeting Jupiter, because the sun in Leo will be a moment for us to come out from hiding, if we've been hiding, and step into our light, especially if we've been blocked. Jupiter has a very different role. If the sun represents our center, then Jupiter represents our horizon. That's what gives us bigger meaning, the bigger picture. And Jupiter's always looking beyond what is familiar. It's curious. It's seeking meaning, wisdom, justice, and growth. But Jupiter is also expansion, generosity, luck, and abundance. It encourages us to see the bigger picture and remind us that life is always capable of becoming something more expansive than something we ever imagined. It's so optimistic, right? This is why Jupiter is called the greater benefic in traditional astrology. And it's not because it simply hands out good fortune, but Jupiter expands and it increases whatever it touches, right? Good or bad. And it brings opportunities to learn, to grow, to teach, and to mentor, but also to develop a broader perspective of ourselves and of the world around us, not just us. So Jupiter in Leo, when he enters Leo, many astrologers immediately start talking about confidence, creativity, and success, which is true. But while those themes are very much a part of the story, I think that just scratches the surface, right? Leo is fixed fire. It preserves inspiration and creativity. Fire begins, it starts it. It's fixed fire sustains just like a candle. And in the sign of Leo, Jupiter brings thoughts around, how do I continue expressing my light after the applause ends, right? Or let's just say after the candle runs out, or you put out the candle. And this is also, a deep lesson for Leo, that they must be aware and learn something that they must learn from, knowing when to blow out the candle, when to let others shine, when to hand over the crown. As astrologer Liz Green beautifully writes, Leo is described as the development of the unique individual essence and its quest for source. In other words, the sign of Leo doesn't just want you to become special. It wants you to discover the truest version of yourself. Leo's greatest creation isn't a painting, isn't a performance or a business. Leo's greatest creation is just meant to be the self, however that may be, right? But that doesn't happen automatically. It has to take action and passion and the heart. Leo is the heart. And the ancients understood that Leo represents an inner battle, right? Between developing an ego and our instinctive nature. In many ways, Leo is an alchemical sign. Just as alchemy sought out to transform base metals into gold, Leo transforms raw ambition from the heart into integrity, pride into dignity, and self interest into generosity. That's why Jupiter is so fascinating here. When I think of the Sun in Leo meeting Jupiter in Leo, I picture, whatever you touch will turn into gold. But I'm going to be honest, something really irritating, just not irritating, sorry. Something that that keep hearing is that Jupiter is the planet of luck, expansion. Yes, it is, to put it simply, right? But beyond that, it's so much more. We often hear that Jupiter makes everything bigger, but Jupiter also teaches us that something we rarely all talk about, and that is the importance of limits. With Jupiter, there's always Saturn. They work together, but I'm not going to go into this too much because I already have a video that I made on this, and so I've linked it below, or I've linked it somewhere. But with Jupiter, real growth comes from actually believing that we can do anything with that optimism. It's like believing in yourself, when Jupiter enters Leo. And Jupiter enlarges that solar principle and our essence. It magnifies our desire to create, to lead, to inspire, and to be recognized. And you can almost say that Jupiter in Leo becomes the biggest sun of all. It expands it, right? So limiting access is needed. So when Sun and Jupiter in Leo come together, when these two planets come together, no matter what sign, we have a meeting between our identity and our vision. We have a meeting between our purpose and the possibility of the purpose, between who we believe we are and who we are capable of becoming. It's giving unlimited faith in oneself and one's power. And again, the possibility that whatever you touch will turn into gold. And so many people think of this a lucky transit, and it certainly can be and will be, but it can also coincide with opportunities and recognition. But I also think there's a deeper meaning, and something much more profound with this transit. From a psychological perspective, the sun symbolizes the ego, but not in the everyday sense of arrogance. It's in depth psychology, the ego is our consciousness. It's our sense of self. It's the organizer of our life experience. And Jupiter's role is not just simply to make the ego go bigger. It's that deeper function to broaden our perspective so that our ego can align with something much more meaningful to us. A healthy Sun-Jupiter conjunction doesn't inflate the personality. It matures it, develop into it. It shifts us from asking, how can I be recognized? Look at me. Or how can I use these gifts in service to something greater or for everyone else rather than myself? And so the sun doesn't become brighter or greater just because Jupiter arrives, knocks on the door, and says, hello. No, it's Jupiter gives the sun permission to shine farther and perhaps brighter. It expands our confidence and our creativity and our generosity for others, right? Our willingness to step into something larger, something bigger than ourselves. And so that doesn't necessarily mean becoming important or selfish. It means becoming I can't even talk today. Becoming ourselves, authentic, true to our nature, according to our natal sun. Because we have to remember that this does go back to our own natal charts at the end of the day. We must look at where our natal sun is in our own charts. But we'll go a little bit more on that later. But in the natal chart, the sun conjunct Jupiter, whether by transit or in the natal chart, is a placement known for charisma, generosity, and it has a remarkable ability to inspire confidence in others, the public too. And there's often a natural talent for leadership and, of course, performance and teaching and just simply walking into a room and demanding presence, right, with this placement, which It's no surprise that many people with Jupiter in Leo seem very comfortable being seen, and they often carry a tremendous faith in themselves and confidence and their ability to overcome obstacles and that fear. Robert Hand described Jupiter as the will to grow, expand, and experience as much as the universe as possible. And in Leo, that growth happens by fully expressing one's creative potential. But again, every gift has its shadow. The same confidence that inspires others can also become superiority, as well as the same desire to lead can also become the need for applause. And so the same generosity can become extravagant, right? And so in this sign, it reminds us that there's a profound difference between being noble and being seen and simply wanting to be admired. And the sun shines because it's its nature to shine, but it doesn't ask for permission and it doesn't demand an applause. That may be one of the greatest lessons of this transit. Self-knowledge comes before self-expression. Until we truly know ourselves, we're often just performing versions of ourselves that we hope other people will love. We're performing for others. And like I mentioned before, this transit comes 2 hours before a full moon in Aquarius, mitigating that Sun and Jupiter conjunction and bringing us back in inward. And so this brings us to one of my favorite myths associated with the Sun, Apollo. You guys know I love bringing in myth in everything and every transit because I just feel it's an important part of astrology and for self-development, most of all. And myth speaks to us on an emotional and imaginative level, and it extends our minds before our current limiting thought structures that we have or our beliefs that we have. It helps us compartmentalize. I can never say that word. Compartmentalize our thoughts into a story, something we've already seen or something that we read. And myths are also archetypal. They're symbolic, they're timeless and universal, which gives us an ability to place a feeling to a story. With the Sun in Leo, we are looking through the lens of Apollo. And although Helios was originally the sun god in Greek mythology, Apollo gradually became associated with the qualities that we recognize as a solar consciousness, the solar figure. And he wasn't simply the god of light and the sun god. He governed healing, prophecy, music, beauty, truth, and sacred order. In myth, Apollo is not represented as the physical sun that, shines in the sky, but it is the carrier of the sun. He is not the light itself, but the divine being who carries the sun in his golden chariot. So therefore, Apollo is the vessel or the container for something else that infuses or ignites our existence, our essence. And it's not a career or a relationship, but how we get there with the vessel. And one of the most beautiful descriptions of Apollo says that he removes pollution and he restores the unclean man or the unclean woman to a state of grace. And psychologically, that's fascinating, right? Apollo isn't just healing the body first. He's illuminating consciousness. He's helping us see clearly. As one author writes, Apollo was the god people prayed to when they needed sight. For his brow penetrates the murkiest of dilemmas, and his music stills the confused and the turbulent heart. I think that's exactly what this conjunction is capable of doing. The Sun and Jupiter together don't simply make us feel bigger and more confident. They will illuminate where we've forgotten who we are, where we were hidden. They restore confidence that has become buried or is beneath fear or criticism, self-criticism, comparison, or years of trying to become what everyone else expected us to be. So Jupiter, on the other hand, corresponds with Zeus. We know that, right? The king of the Olympian gods. And Zeus isn't simply powerful. He represents divine law, justice, protection, hospitality, and the responsibility that comes with authority. His role was to maintain balance among both gods and mortals, ensuring that order is prevailed over chaos. And psychologically, Zeus symbolizes our capacity to live or lead with wisdom rather than impulse. And he reminds us that true authority isn't about control, it's more about our responsibility. When Apollo and Zeus come together symbolically through this conjunction, something beautiful happens. Vision meets purpose, creativity meets wisdom, personal expression meets ethical responsibility. Are we seeking applause, or are we offering something meaningful to the greater good? Are we expressing ourselves to prove our worth, or because our gifts are genuine, they genuinely have something valuable to contribute? This is where Leo often gets misunderstood. Leo is more than about being seen, and it's the highest expression is that Leo teaches us to become the source of light for others. Just as the sun nourishes life without asking for recognition, a healthy Leo energy inspires others simply by fully embodying its own nature. That's what Leo's really good at. And Jupiter magnifies that potential. It reminds us that our influence grows naturally when we live in alignment with our own values instead of chasing validation. That's the key. So together, Apollo and Zeus invite us into a kind of mature confidence, a confidence rooted not in ego, but in purpose, not in proving ourselves, but in becoming faithful stewards of the gifts that we've been given. That's Leo, doing the things without the expectation of any outcome. And perhaps that's the real blessing of this conjunction. It's, the universe suddenly giving us more light and we see it. It's that we're finally willing to let the light that has always been there become visible if we're shy, right? This is why I don't think the highest expression of Jupiter in Leo is self-confidence. It's self-knowledge, because once you truly know yourself, confidence becomes a natural outcome rather than something you have to manufacture or falsely create. So with this transit, I want you to imagine Zeus placing his hand on, Zeus placing the hand on Apollo and saying, the world needs your light right now, not your performance, not your ego, your truth, your prophecy, right? The sun and Jupiter, if that's kind of what it feels like. And this conjunction has the potential to bring healing around a relationship, around authority or a father figure as well. In astrology, both the sun and Jupiter have long been associated with mentors and kings and teachers, and also parental guidance. So for some people, this transit may inspire a reconciliation, a forgiveness, or a healthier understanding of all of these issues or these leadership, both in yourself, independently, with others. But every healing transit also has a warning. Whenever Jupiter enlarges something or whatever touches, it brings both the gift and a blind spot. Confidence can become arrogance, and vision can become, righteousness, self-righteousness. Optimism can, ignore important realities. It can blur them, because Sun and Jupiter, when they're conjunct, it's more than luck and abundance. It enlarges the solar principle, and that becomes, that also can become hubris, depending on the condition that these planets are in your chart, right? It's all kind of dependent on that. And perhaps more importantly, the choices we make when it comes to this transit. This transit is inviting us to become bright without becoming blinded by our own light, and to come into ourselves. And psychologically, this transit can also bring up fears, like, what if I fail? What if people judge me? What if I'm not good? Or what if I'm not good enough, let's just say, right? So ironically, those fears can often appear, right when we're about to step into this bigger picture, this bigger version of ourselves. And so that's the shadow of Leo. It isn't arrogance. It's more often hiding in our gifts because being visible feels vulnerable. It's uncomfortable, so that's just its nature. Like, I'm uncomfortable doing videos, but the more I do them, the more comfortable I am. And I guess that's a shadow. You hide, you like to be behind, and now, who will be affected by this transit the most? Well, that is obviously going to be Leo placements, especially with those that have sun, moon, rising, their midheaven, or their chart helm ruler between 3 and 9 degrees in the sign of Leo. And this is because the conjunction is happening in your sign. And this is actually not just the Sun Jupiter, right? Leo, you guys are being hit big time, whether you're a Leo rising or you have a lot of placements in Leo. We have this Sun Jupiter transit. Jupiter's there for a whole year, but we also have the South Node entering Leo. So there's this other, we have an eclipse there in August. And so there's a lot of energy this is kind of maybe the beginning point of. But again, if you have any planets in Leo, and more specifically, you'll feel this more if you have any planets between 3 degrees and 9 degrees of Leo, because this conjunction is happening at 6. And we always like to use 3 degrees, on either side. You could do 4 as well. 3 is probably best, but this is the range. And so Leos, whether you're Leo rising or Leo placements, you will feel this the most, right? And again, this is because this conjunction is happening in your sign. And fixed signs as well, Aquarius, Taurus, and Scorpio, you will also feel this transit because this transit's going to fall at one of your angles in your chart. And it's either going to make a square or an opposition to those sections in your chart. So if you also have planets in the fixed signs of Taurus, Aquarius, and Scorpio, you will also feel this even more, again, between 3 degrees of the fixed signs to 9 degrees. If you were born in the day and have a date chart, Jupiter is your benefactive sect, so Jupiter transits tend to be more favorable to you. So this is also something nice to take in consideration with the transit. But if your perfection house is in Leo as well, meaning the sun is your time lord, then you will also feel this energy strongly, as this conjunction will fall in your perfection house. And one of the planets, the sun is your time lord, is one activating this transit. And lastly, if Jupiter is your time lord, you will also feel this because, again, the energy that's playing out, Jupiter is the time lord and it's one of the planets activating this transit. So now if you have any placements between 3 degrees to 9 degrees, again, let me know in the comments below and I would love to hear from you. Or if you're watching this after the transit, and I would just love to know what you've experienced so far. I would love to hear from you, so put it below. Now, let's quickly talk about how to interpret this transit into your own chart. So from a psychological perspective, many of us develop identities that have helped us survive, survival mode skills, right? We become this responsible one and the caretaker, the achiever, the peacemaker, the perfectionist. But those identities, they may have protected us, up to some point, but over time, they can become our internal prisons. So Jupiter meeting the sun asks us to loosen those old limiting beliefs that we have of ourselves or of our lives. And it encourages us to imagine a life that's bigger than our fears, bigger than our doubts, bigger than our stories that we've created or we've inherited. So where we have Leo in our charts, let's look at that. So that's what becomes the invitation for those changes. So first, take your chart out and see which house corresponds to the sign of Leo. And do you have any planets in Leo that need to show expression as well? Because they will need to be expressed. And so look to see which house Leo rules. Does Leo rule your 11th house? Just for a very simple, let's just say simple example, to see where does your needs need to be expressed, your authentic nature, with groups and alliances. That's the 11th house, right? And so this transit becomes very personal because the ruler is the sun. And so we must look to where we have our natal sun in our charts to interpret this a little bit better. And so we need to look at the house and the sign that our natal sun is in order to see where that nature is going to be expressed in our charts. So we need to pay closer attention to that. So is your sun in the 12th house? So perhaps you're afraid to shine in large groups to the 11th house and you prefer to be behind the scenes. So maybe this transit is going to ask you to step out of that fear and be seen and to step into the light or the public. This is where the natal promise gets activated and it comes into our lives and into our charts. So look to see where you have your natal sun and where is it? Where is it wanting to bring attention and growth and illumination? And so we might all experience this transit very differently, right? Depending on how our chart is set up, in how this transit aspects other planets in our charts and how it points to everything, right? So perhaps you have planets or points in the fixed signs between 3 and 9 degrees. So you're going to feel this transit a little bit with more tension or conflict, perhaps, depending on your chart configuration, or perhaps this transit blends in more positively, more flowing, more supportive, right? Because this aspect is the Sun Jupiter is by sextile or by trine. If you have placements in Libra, Gemini, or Sagittarius or Aries. So remember that you can't just sit on transits and wait for something to happen. You have to act on them. Every Jupiter transit offers possibilities, but possibility is not the same thing as destiny. We still have to say yes if something comes up. We have to act on it. If this transit opens a door, walk through it. If you're invited to speak, teach, create, lead, or share your work into the world, don't wait until you feel like it's perfectly ready. Put it out there. And an event might happen, but we have to choose to participate. In Hellenistic astrology, it reminds us that transit describes times of greater potential, of growth, but they're not guarantees. And Jupiter presents opportunities, but we still have to respond to them. So with this Sun and Jupiter conjunction in Leo, it's going to be bringing up topics around, or themes, let's just say, around where is this, where is this transit trying to give me visibility, right? Where is it asking me to become a bigger leader? Where is it asking me for creative expression? Where in my chart is the Sun Jupiter conjunction trying to bring out, is it personal development or perhaps spiritual opportunities? And what about recognition? In Leo, we have to remember that this transit can also bring limitations. This can look like ego inflation, craving applause, dramatic behavior, exaggeration, overpromising, spending beyond one's means, and or believing that confidence alone is enough. But because this is a Sun-Jupiter conjunction, this transit can also look like an opportunity that comes to you, that helps bring out your natural gifts. If a creative expression is knocking on your door, take advantage, launch that creative project you've been sitting on, or start that blog or that book you're wanting to write. Start that performance or start your YouTube channel, or perhaps a leadership opportunity comes up for you. So accept the promotion or mentor someone entering your field. This transit often rewards those willing to lead through generosity rather than ego. But if you do choose to take on practical action here, some things to remember with this transit is how to work with this energy, right? So create something that reflects your authentic self. Say yes to healthy visibility. Lead with generosity and the heart instead of needing that recognition. Take a calculated risk that aligns with your purpose. Celebrate someone else's success as enthusiastically as you would as your own. Ask yourself each morning, how can I shine in that way that benefits others? As this Sun and Jupiter conjunction unfolds, remember that the Sun has never questioned whether it deserves to rise. It simply fulfills its nature. Perhaps that is the invitation of Leo, not to become someone new, but to become more fully who you have always meant to be. To stop maybe measuring your worth by applause, comparison, or perfection, and instead allowing your own light to serve something greater than yourself. This conjunction isn't just asking you to be the brightest person in the room or the brightest crayon in the box. It's asking you to stop hiding the gifts that you can offer. So, wherever 6 degrees of Leo falls in your chart, ask yourself, where is the life inviting me to lead with courage, create with integrity, and shine without fear? Because when we stop chasing recognition and start living from our true nature, our light doesn't just change our lives, it just changes. So, like the sun itself, it quietly becomes a source of warmth, hope, and inspiration for everyone it touches. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that you found this useful and you come back here next week, because next week we are going over all 12 horoscopes and its journey through Jupiter in Leo for all 12 signs. So make sure you subscribe and like this, and I will see you next week. Until the next time, bye.